Okay, so well, thank you very much to Andrew and Katarina for organizing this, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for being here. What I'm going to present here is, well, of course, it's a work in progress, but more importantly, it's a project on which Daniel Cohen and I have been working. Uh, I'm going to present it as I'm going to say that I'm presenting this because we haven't discussed everything, and there might be a few things that he might not agree. But in case you spot any good idea, you know where it comes from. So um, let's begin. Let me see because I have something here in the middle of the screen. Yeah, there. So the starting point is uh, that in work on intellectual virtues and virtue epistemology and of course in virtue argumentation, we usually emphasize the importance of being willing to change one's mind, of acknowledging the strongest reasons and changing our minds when it's necessary. And for this, we insist on the value of virtues such as open-mindedness, uh, which, which makes us willing to consider different points of view, especially claims that conflict with what we believe, intellectual humility understood as the virtue that helps us acknowledge our limitations and consider the possibility, which is very real, that we are wrong. And you all probably uh, know this virtue that Michael Bamsbrook proposed several years ago, which is he, if I'm not mistaken, he considered it the central critical thinking virtue, the willingness to be rationally persuaded. Uh, we must, uh, he didn't frame it like that, but well, you can say that we must follow the strongest reasons wherever they lead, even if they force us to modify or abandon our beliefs. So the implication is that, well, of course, I agree with all that. I think all this is important. But, and the implication, of course, is that if we don't change our mind in light of uh, good enough reasons, then we are vicious in some way. We are closed minded or we are arrogant or something like that. But we rarely uh, take into account how difficult sometimes uh, changing our mind is. Uh, of course, losing an argument or it's very difficult to frame it otherwise, but admitting that one is wrong in an argument can be framed as a good thing. Uh, you know, I have chosen here this paper by Julius Rooney, but there are others written by Catherine Handelby and others who emphasize the fact that losing an argument is not actually losing. It's actually an epistemic gain. And perhaps Rooney is most clear here when she said after any exchange of evidence and reasoning, I end up agreeing with your not text. I lose the argument and you win, or at least that's how we usually describe it. But surely I am the one who has made the epistemic gain, however small. I have replaced a probably false belief with a probably true one, and you have made no such gain. And this is something with which I also agree, just as happened with the importance of the virtues that I mentioned before. But as I was saying, we rarely acknowledge the cost that admitting defeat in an argument involves, and that's what will concern me here. The context, the psychological, social, or political context can make more or less difficult for an arguer to admit that she was wrong and consequently modify her beliefs. Sometimes when we are discussing about something that is not very crucial to say, well, we can change our mind. That's not a problem. If I believe that I don't know, I having an argument with my wife about how to go to the supermarket. I believe that the path is to the right. She believes that the path is to the left. If I turn out to be wrong, then I can easily change mine, and I admit that I was wrong. That's not a big problem. But we also discuss about more crucial things about politics, religion, about uh, about what are even about what are our epistemic authorities. Should I trust what scientists say, or should I trust what uh, alternative media say, things like that? And those are very often quite important for our identity. So admitting defeat or changing one's mind in those cases is, doesn't go without cost. Possible social costs that are involved in losing an argument uh, may be that, for example, there are certain beliefs that obviously are required to belong to a certain group, and rejecting that belief will make or probably will cause that the argument will be rejected from the group, or it might be the case that the arguer's reputation may be damaged by admitting that she was wrong. I think, well, I'm not sure if that's so. I also think that happens in philosophy, but when one's reputation is based on being right, on on knowing a lot of things, we are all we all teach after all. We are supposed to know a lot of things. If we turn out to be wrong about something, our reputation may be damaged. Um, and finally, another possible example is that the arguer might need to dramatically adjust her behavior as a result of the modification of her beliefs. This might happen with uh, even with very simple beliefs, such as whether alcohol, small small amounts of alcohol are good for health or not, or it can happen with whether God exists or not. From the less crucial beliefs to the most important, they all influence our behavior. So changing one belief uh, and very often entails changing our behavior. So other costs that have been discussed by John Casey in a paper written a few years ago, which was a paper about, well, a related thing about adversariality in argument, but there is a paragraph which I find very, very enlightening about all the costs that are involved in changing one's view. For example, in this case, he was talking specifically about changing one's mind about some public policy issue. Some implications of that will be a change in our attitude towards those who continue to hold that belief, alteration of your social relations with those who hold those beliefs, revision of other beliefs. This may be just an epistemic implication, but it's also costly, at least in psychological terms. Revision of other beliefs which will no longer be consistent, the embarrassment of having been wrong and having been corrected, that this is related to the reputation thing that I was mentioning before, the financial costs, if there are, associated with the changes in belief, and time and energy dedicated to new pursuits. Now, most of these costs, as I was saying, come from psychological, social, and political contexts. They are probably unavoidable. Uh, our society being as it is, there is nothing much that we can do to prevent those costs. And of course, some of them have to do with our psychology. So there is not a lot that we can do. But since I'm interested in virtual argumentation theory, I would like to focus on the behavior of the other arguer, the arguer who we can say won the argument, because the behavior of the co-arguer can also influence whether uh, changing one's mind becomes more or less difficult. And that's I will focus on that. So I will focus on how the behavior of the arguer makes it more costly to change one's mind, and also what a virtuous arguer is supposed to do to alleviate or prevent that problem. So let's see a few examples about when can this happen. So there are several. Of course, here you will see the hand, Daniel Cohen's hand in imagination involved in these cases, and they all involve cases. They are cases of arguments which might have an impeccable reasoning and could result in a victory for the proponent, in principle, if the reasoning is good. But they are cases in which persuasion comes at a high cost, and that's because of the other argument. So that's what interests us. The first one is beating a dead horse. One of the things that the arguer can do wrong is continue to argue after the point has already been conceded. This is a behavior that, of course, plays no positive role in settling a difference of opinion or in persuasion or establishing a conclusion. But of course, it can contribute negatively by fostering resentment, which can undermine the resolution. If the arguer is not satisfied with just with her co-arguers admitting that she was wrong, then she can insist with arguments, and that it's true that her co-arguer has already admitted that she was wrong, but this can create a precedent, which, well, I will not admit. I will not make this admission in front of this guy because I know that she won't let it go. The second one is the blaming finger. And this is a mixture of social circumstances that are probably unavoidable with the arguer's behavior. And this kind of cases happen because arguments often are not just about what is true and what is false, or perhaps they most often are, but they also involve other things, such as who is to blame for something. We very often, in fact, the colloquial sense of the word argument in English kind of reminds us of that. Well, there is someone has made something wrong, and there is a discussion about that. So imagine that two friends get into an argument because one borrowed the other's car and returned it with an empty gas tank. The one who borrowed the car can be persuaded to admit that what she did was wrong, and to promise that she will never do it again. So let's assume that the one who did that, who borrowed the car and returned it with an empty gas tank, is a reasonable person. So you can talk to her and she will acknowledge that, okay, yeah, perhaps I should have thought about that. However, her friend will not be satisfied with that, with just that admission. It's It's very similar to the previous one, but it's not exactly the same because her friend will insist on making her feel bad about it. So it's not enough that you admit that you did something wrong and that you promise that you will not never do it again, but I want you to feel very, very bad about that. So that again makes it very difficult for someone who is arguing with this kind of person to admit, to be persuaded, to admit that, yeah, okay, you are right. The third case, which of course sooner or later we have to get through the adversary paradigm, and this is the one. The third case is the ultra competitor. The imagine the well, it's not hard to imagine that. In fact, I could put here an image of a real example. The ultra competitor is someone for whom arguing is always a contest. So someone has to win, someone has to lose. Arguments are an arena in which arguers' intellectual abilities are put to the test, and she makes a great effort to prevail over her opponent. Um, the ultra competitor uses words such as attack, destroy. Well, you know all this is not new. You know all the literature on the adversarial paradigm of argumentation and all the criticism that has received. Um, and she can even the ultra competitor can even keep score of her past argumentative exchanges and make sure that there is always a winner and a loser. This thing about keeping score is something that it clearly refers to the example that I put here, because I didn't know that there were people keeping score of debates, but apparently there are. And of course, this is also a problem because this also makes persuasion costly because nobody wants to lose. And also, it's a cost that is created by the argument that is involved in the situation. So it's not simply a social or a circumstantial problem. Um, the fourth one, I think is the take it all or leave it, the kind of arguer that uh, doesn't allow partial concessions and doesn't want to discuss as a very specific issue, but sees argumentation in general as a clash of worldviews. So, for a very, I think, clear example, imagine two people with very different sets of beliefs. We will say that one is a Democrat and the other is a Republican in the contemporary US political landscape. And they are arguing about a specific issue. For instance, gun control. Let's assume that the argument is about that. And there is a point at which the Democrat begins to understand the Republican's reasons for her view and ends up agreeing with her on that point. Just, okay, I begin to see why you want more freedom to, well, not more freedom, but why you don't want more control on guns. However, uh, even though the Democrat is beginning to be willing to admit uh, the, the the Republicans' reasons and that the Republicans' claims may be plausible, the problem is that the Republican only wants her co-arguer to, we can say, to become a Republican sympathizer. So the Republican insists that she must not only adopt her view on gun control, but all Republican views on abortion, healthcare, and so on. So the Republican doesn't allow her to argue to change her mind about just one belief. She will only be satisfied with total surrender. Perhaps the way we have described this make, might make it sound like very radical, but I think this is quite this is what happens when in argument the arguer mix all the topics, mix all the issues up, and at the end, the discussion is not about the specific issue which provoked it, but they are all discussing about whether your whole worldview is right or wrong. And finally, yeah, finally, the interrogator. The interrogator is someone who wants answers, and she wants them now. Imagine an argument in which the interrogator has argued well for her claims, so her co-arguer is beginning to have doubts, is beginning to consider the possibility that the interrogator is right, and she might even change her mind in the long run. So she says something like, "Oh, okay, you may have a point. I will have to think about that," but the interrogator has no time. She will insist that her co-arguer must decide now whether, well, tell me, do you agree with me or not? Did I present, is there anything wrong with my argument or not? And you have to answer now. There is no time to consider things. So this also makes it very difficult, makes persuasion very difficult, because we'll get to that. I will get back to that later, but very often persuasion takes time, and especially when it's about some sensitive issue. We need some time. Forcing people to decide now whether they agree with our arguments or not might make it difficult for them to be receptive to what we say. So, something that perhaps someone could wonder is why should we worry about these cases? Why is this a problem? I mean, yeah, of course, this happens in real life, but in principle, this could be taken as a moral problem, and that perhaps argumentation theory should not address. My point here is that it's not simply, well, even if it was simply a moral problem, it could be interesting for argumentation, but I don't think it's simply a moral problem that has nothing to do with epistemology of argumentation. Because, of course, if we are interested in the abstract definition of cogency or things like that, then yes, then we don't need to get into these messy issues. But if we are interested in achieving rational results by means of argumentation, through argumentation, which is what I think we all want, because that's one of the benefits of argumentation. And we are interested in achieving that in the real world, then the real conditions in which argumentation takes place matter. And this is all that I say. I hope they were not very far-fetched examples. If I'm not wrong, then those are part of the real conditions of argumentation. And of course, there are different views of argumentation. It all depends on what we think the function or the point or the benefits of argumentation are. But just to take a couple of examples, if, as Andrew Aberdeen has proposed, if the point of argumentation virtue is to spread truth, then we should worry about the examples that we just saw, because we were talking about the conditions that facilitate persuasion. And in order to spread truth, of course, we need to persuade people of those truths. On the other hand, if just to take a very different view, if the point of argumentation is to be an exercise in manifest rationality, like as Johnson proposed, then I believe that the vicious behavior that we saw in those examples also may also block rational persuasion. So we have the same problem. These are problems that arise in the real life and that hinder the supposed benefits or function. If you want to talk about function, I'm very um, I don't feel very confident saying function, but well, anyway, if someone believes in the function of argumentation, well, then this also blocks the alleged function of argumentation. So let's analyze those cases. What's the problem in those cases? What goes wrong? Well, the first thing that we can say, and this I will try to be quick because this has been repeated a lot of times. The first thing that we can point out is that the reasoning in each of those examples could be unimpeachable. That's not the problem. In all those cases, I didn't talk about the arguments that were presented, but the examples, as I described them, are perfectly compatible with a very with a cogent reason. So the problem does not lie in the so-called reasons, conclusion, complex of propositions. And, and of course, that was one of the motivations for virtue argumentation theories. And you know, all the discussion that about, well, one of the things that was proposed was that cogency is not all that there is to argumentation. You remember Paglieri talking about cogent arguments that are bad, the cogencies, and fallacies that are good, the goodnesses. And I think it was like that. Now I don't remember if it was the other way around. But anyway, and of course, Cohen insisted that a completely satisfactory argument involves much more than simply cogency. This idea that the kind of argument after which the participants can say, "Wow, that was a good argument." That has to involve much more than simply the cogency of the arguments as products that were presented. So in principle, it seems that virtue argumentation theories should be in a good position to address those problems. And I think they are, but I don't think that it's so straightforward because there are certain things that should change. And this is something that this is we could say like a limit of virtue argumentation theories that was pointed out by Oliveira de Souza in a very good paper that was published in Informal Logic a few years ago, in which Oliveira de Souza took a distinction from virtue ethics between self-regarding virtues and other regarding virtues. And the distinction is between virtues that benefit mainly the agent who possesses them, and that's the case with self-regarding virtues, such as certain virtues can be between two kinds. Certain virtues are a little ambiguous, but I think these are clear examples of self-regarding virtues: perseverance, prudence. There is a typo here there. Sorry. Prudence, courage, and on the other hand, we have other regarding virtues that are virtues that benefit mainly other people, such as benevolence, generosity, justice. What Oliveira de Souza pointed out is that virtue argumentation theories have focused on self-regarding virtues, mainly because we draw from the literature on virtue epistemology, mainly from there rather than from virtue ethics. And virtue epistemology, it's true that more or less the same happen. Virtues are mainly self-regarding. He didn't say, and I'm not saying that the virtues that appear in virtual augmentation theory and virtue epistemology are exclusively self-regarding. There are also other regarding virtues, and in particular in the famous list made by Andrew Aberdeen, there are other regarding virtues. But it's true that when we have discussed them, we have discussed what virtue argumentation could give argumentation theories, we mainly discuss the epistemic benefits for the subject and things like that. And Oliveira de Souza urged us to expand our conception of virtues to also encompass other regarding virtues and to give equal weight to these virtues. And I think that's relevant here because that's exactly what happened in these examples. I'm talking about the examples, the bad behavior that we have seen, those examples, is not bad, it's not vicious because that causes a damage to the arguer, to the arguer who is behaving like that. But there are cases in which the arguer causes a wrong for her co-arguer. So the arguer, what essentially is happening is that the arguer makes it difficult for her co-arguer to be persuaded. And in other words, the arguer hinders her co-arguer's cultivation and exercise of the virtues of open-mindedness, humility, and willingness to be rationally persuaded. That is, the thing here is that in a way, by making it so costly for the other arguer to be persuaded, she's hindering her co-arguer's cultivation of virtues. She's not, I don't want to say allowing, but she's not making things easy for her co-arguer to be virtuous. To be virtuous. So, what we need, of course, is, as Oliveira de Souza said, to expand our conception of argumentative virtues and to just give equal focus to I don't want to say obligations, but to the fact that the virtuous arguer should also help her co-arguer to become virtuous. So a virtuous arguer is not only someone who cares about her own character, but also someone who wants to help her co-arguer become virtuous. She also cares about the character of her co-arguer. And I think that makes sense if we consider virtue as a way, if we consider virtuous argumentation as a way of participating in the community, as Cohen suggested, and I think it's a very good idea. I think there is a very good, I'm not going to get into that here, but just incidentally, I think there is a very good case to base virtues on a McIntyrean conception of the practice of argumentation. And I'm not going to get into there because I know it's problematic, but just so that you know what I have in mind, that if arguing is a way of participating in the community, then I not only care about me, I should care about everyone involved, because what I care at the end is about the quality of all the argumentative practice in my community. It's not just that I want to become a virtuous arguer for me or for my own sake, but because uh, I want healthy and fruitful argumentative practices in my community. So if I care about practices, then I should contribute to the sustainment of those practices with my own behavior. I should, of course, I should care to become virtuous myself, but uh, I also need others to become virtuous. So I should be interested in helping them become virtuous. So I think this is a good case to be made why virtuous hardware should also contribute to the cultivation of virtues in others. And just to finish, uh, going back to the examples that we saw, what lessons can we draw from there? What specific strategies could help the cultivation of those virtues in others? Well, um, this is probably the most just a disclaimer. This is probably the most underdeveloped section of the talk. So any ideas, comments, or criticism about this part is more than welcome because there are probably gaps. But some strategies that Virtuous hardware could follow to avoid uh, at least some cost, at least the cost of persuasion that depends on other people, on other arguers, are the follow. I will present the following 5 strategies. The first one is avoiding framing the conversation as uh, a competition in which there is a winner and a loser. This is not very, as I say, this is not a novel proposal. It has been discussed for several years. But I think it's worth insisting on it because when we frame an argument in terms of winners and losers, uh, I think that leads to resistance to persuasion because, of course, nobody wants to lose. But uh, this doesn't mean that the argument should not be adversarial. So I'm talking here about simply about talk of winners, losers, as we saw, scorekeeping, things like that. But we could say that all that is, as Gobier said, ancillary adversariality, but we could admit a minimal adversariality that doesn't involve all that. And we should acknowledge that some arguers feel comfortable in the role of adversary. And if everybody in the argument feels comfortable with that role, then that should be okay. And Katarina said in a very interesting paper, um, it will also be a mistake to prohibit adversariality and to force arguers to be, I don't know, in a different to frame the argument in a different way as an inquiry or a deliberation, because um, perhaps we are making them play a role that they cannot fulfill because they don't feel comfortable in that role. So the lesson here is not that an argument should not be adversarial. I think the lesson should be that we should try to avoid imposing uh, on roles on other people that they have difficulties fulfilling. And in any case, I think however the argument is structured, I think we can always avoid uh, this framing of in terms of winners, losers, keeping score, things like that. So that could be one strategy. The other one, of course, is focusing on the issue, treat each issue separately. It's not a good idea in general to address all our co-arguers' worldview at once, because that will make it impossible to come to an agreement about uh, to come to an agreement in general, because it's very difficult to come to an agreement about the whole worldview, and and also because uh, worldviews are associated uh, for all of us, are associated with our identity. So it's very different to address one specific issue and to admit that I was wrong on that specific issue, that to admit that I was wrong about my whole set of beliefs. Uh, the, the second case will make it very costly for me to be persuaded. So things like that, if, for example, two people are discussing the benefits, the possible benefits or harms of market economy. Uh, um, One of them manages to convince the other that the market economy has produced some good results. So imagine that her co-arguer says, well, if you admit that, then I guess you should no longer consider yourself a communist, shouldn't you? What do you say about that? And that arguer wants to begin an argument um, about a whole set of beliefs. Uh, so it's better to once we have come to an agreement about a specific issue, later we can begin a different argument, but uh, not to mix a lot of claims. The other one is, of course, to give time to your co-arguer. One of the problems that I mentioned before is that of arguers that want an answer now. Um, but persuasion sometimes takes time, as Jelsen saw in the 2020 OSA, which was the last OSA. Yeah, in a very, this is a beautiful paper. Um, um, he interviewed several people uh, who had changed their mind on some sensitive, well, not necessarily sensitive, but some political issue about her views, about their views on the European Union, for example, and they had changed their minds on that, and they were uh, explaining how that happened. And one of the interesting things is that uh, since they first heard the argument that made them change their mind until they finally changed their minds, the mean time was like 4 or 5 years, I think, something like that. And this happens, this sometimes happens. So perhaps arguments do not require a resolution here and now. And this is uh, also a point that uh, argumentation theories should perhaps consider, that it's not always necessary to end an argument with a resolution, at least in that moment. It may be enough that reasons have been exchanged and considered and will be considered in the future. Um, we should also acknowledge personal implications, as in the case of in which the argument was about having made something wrong, borrowing a car, a friend that borrowed her friend's car, turned it with an empty gas tank. All those things, very often we argue about things that someone has, some wrongs that someone has made. Um, and there are other things like um, there are other beliefs that have personal implications, such as beliefs that are required to belong to a certain group. I also talk about that. Public commitment. Sometimes uh, a belief is not just a belief, something that I believed before, but a commitment that I made in public and that people associate with me, and it's very hard to change one's mind about that. Well, this is sometimes it's very difficult to prevent those costs. But I think that the virtuous arguer should pay attention to those implications, if possible, alleviate uh, the her co-arguer's concern. And here I think also Michael Gilbert's work is very relevant because we should take into account the fact that arguers have several goals. We don't only want to win the argument, but we also want to uh, to preserve the relationship with the other person, and we also want to maintain our reputation and things like that. So we should have in mind all those things, and let's not narrowly focus on just whether that is true or false. Of course, I don't mean uh, that we should leave truth apart. And, I think that the argumentation is still the argument is still epistemic, but um, if we really want persuasion and not at a high cost, then uh, we should know, we should acknowledge the practical implications of persuasion and try to um, manage them the best we can. And finally, of course, we should ask ourselves, what will help me to be persuaded? What I don't know. Well, I think we all have had several experiences in which we have been persuaded, we have lost an argument, and it was good. I mean, it felt good, and it felt good because of the way the other person behaved. So we should consider what made us feel good in those cases, what helped us be persuaded without uh, a high cost, and try to exercise some empathy and put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And just I will finish with that. Of course, all the things that I have said uh, create a very great risk, which is the danger of uh, believing that, of assuming that we are right, right? So we are considering how can persuade the other person so that it's not very costly for her. So we seem to be assuming that we are right, and that's dangerous. So we should also have in mind that we might be wrong after all, but I don't think facilitating persuasion the way I'm proposing it creates so high a risk of patronizing or assuming that we are right. Because one of the things that facilitates persuasion is um, to show to the other person, to our co-arguer, that we have seriously and sincerely considered the reasons that we are hearing, the reasons that the co-arguer is presenting to us. So, and we must do that sincerely. So we should really consider them and consider the possibility that we are wrong. I think if our co-arguer sees that we are considering the possibility that we are wrong, then she will also, it won't be that costly for her to consider the same possibility. So in conclusion, what I want to emphasize is that, yes, losing an argument may be an epistemic gain. I really believe so, but it also involves certain costs that we must take into account. Probably most of those costs come from the psychological, social, and political context, and there is probably very little we can do about that, but there is at least a part of those costs that uh, come from the other arguers, and they can make things better or worse. So, virtuous arguer, in this view, is not only someone who is humble, open-minded, and willing to be rationally persuaded, and a lot of the rest of the virtues, but also someone who makes an effort to give her co-arguers an opportunity to exercise those virtues. I believe this is what I'm proposing. I mean, I don't see it as a course on rhetoric or persuasion, but as a strategies to help our coworkers to become virtuous. So in some virtuous hardware is aware of the cost of losing an argument and tries to reduce them if possible, or prevent or even prevent them if possible, or at least not to make things more difficult for them. And that's it. Yeah, the reference. Thank you very much. I thought it would be shorter.